11, 1 Kings chapter number 11. Tonight we're going to be going to continue on with the theme from last week. Last week, if you remember, we talked about what really is. I should say, I messed up. 2 weeks ago, I should say. We talked about what really is the reason why people eventually destroy their own lives when they did so well for so long that God was blessing them. And so we talked about, we had the pause for Father's Day, but we talked about a king by the name of Asa. How old was Asa how long did Asa reign? Can you tell me how long he reigned? Asa reigned a long time. Can you tell me 40 years actually? He reigned 40 years. How many years of that did he do right, of that 40-year reign? You may remember? 36 years. He did well. And when eventually, remember, he fought against an army when he was just 10 years into his reign that was rather large. How many people did the Lubans have in their army? Can you tell me? 1 million. Who said that? I heard the word. 1 million. Well done. How many thousands is that? 1,000. Is that 2,000? No, that's 1 million, yes? 1 million men. And did he have a hope of defeating them? No. So what did he do? You may remember? What did he do? Well, he couldn't, there's no way. He had a 500,000 man army, but his army has not had any action. They've had peace that his whole reign so far. And now he's facing this group of experienced veterans, 1 million of them. And so he had no hope. What did he do? He went to God. He turned to God. And God gave him the victory. Then, many years later, 26 years after that pest, that king of Israel, that diminishing empire, that pest named Baasha, shows up and just annoys them by building up a city to stop trade from coming through into the mountainous kingdom of Judah, because the trade route, of course, went through, by the coastline there in the country of Israel, bypassing Judah. So by cutting off that trade route, they're going to stifle them economically. And so what Asa does, if you remember, here's what's going to change his whole reign. Something so small, but from that point on, everything changes. And here's what he does. If you don't ever forget this. He goes to his treasure house, takes all of his treasure, goes to the house of God, takes all the things that have been dedicated to the house of God. He puts it together, sends it to Ben-Hadad, king of the Syrians, and then Ben-Hadad, he asks him, "Would you please, my dad and you had a league, and we're friends, and is it possible that you could break your treaty with Baasha and just go annoy him and get him off my back?" So the king Ben-Hadad agrees to do that, and goes and attacks, just sends some raiding parties into that side, his border with Israel. And Baasha hears this. He has to redeploy his forces, which are not that many to begin with, over to that border. And while they're there, Mr. Asa smartly goes and grabs all of his people. They run over there, grab all the building materials that they were using to build this fort, bring it on their side of the border, and then build 2 forts of their own. And it works. He solves his problem. Remember that? Who shows up right afterwards, of course? A preacher. The prophet comes and says, "Remember those Lubans? Remember how the Ethiopians, how God helped you to destroy them? Because you turned to him." He said that God, his eyes are going to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong on the behalf of him whose heart is perfect toward him. And he said, "In this you have done foolishly, and from henceforth thou shalt have wars." He said, if you hadn't done that, God was just about to deliver Ben-Hadad, the king of the superpower, into your hand. That was where God was taking you. When Asa heard that, he should have repented and said, "Lord, I'm so sorry. I blew it. I should have gone to you." But instead, what happens in our lives oftentimes is when we take what we had one time given to God, we take it to fix a problem in our lives. The problem that's fixable, if we take what we once gave him and we fix our problem with it, what we'll discover is that the problem was solved. Whatever it was solved. But once that's solved, something in here will have changed. And that's exactly what happened to Asa. First thing he does, He does what you and I cannot do. He put that preacher into an actual physical prison. We can't do that, but we can do that metaphorically in our own hearts. Suddenly, we don't want to be around preaching because the preaching annoys us, because what are we supposed to do? I fix my problem, and now this guy's preaching at me all the time. And what used to be like, because don't forget, after he defeated those Ethiopians, those Lubans, a prophet showed up after that and said, you keep doing that and don't mess up. And it caused him to go even more fervently to serve God. But now he gets preaching and he doesn't want it. And then the Bible says this strange thing. And he oppressed some of the people at the same time. So this sweet older man, the guy who should have been the grandpa of everybody, he's been their king since before any of them were even born. And now he begins to oppress them. Why? Because certain people just annoy him that used to not annoy him. And lastly, he gets disease in his feet. And when he gets this horrible disease, he goes and seeks the advice of the physicians, but never goes to God. Even in all his agony, he never one time just says, Lord, can you have my feet? He's just kind of bitter at God. And it all goes back to that moment when he took what belonged to God and fixed his problem. So that's what we looked at 2 weeks ago. Now we're going to go back to another king of Israel, and we're going to see the downfall of this man. And I want you to then take this and the same, I want you to look at your life. We're going to go through and say, Lord, how am I doing on this? I don't want to go for so long and do so well in the very end, ruin what you were trying to do in my life. So we're going to begin this by going back to the king, when King Solomon was still the king of the combined nation of Israel. When Judah and Israel were still one big nation, this is the height of power that Israel's ever going to reach. The problem is that, as you know, Solomon began to have many wives, and then those wives caused him to turn his heart from God, and he served their other gods, Ashtaroth, the Milcom of the Amorites, and yada yada. He built all the stuff for Chemosh and Molech, all these things right here in chapter 11. So God then says, okay, you did that. Here we go. He stirs up adversaries in verse 26. We're going to start tonight. And this is going to be the word talking tonight, this gentleman here. And Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, the Ephrathite of Zeradah, Solomon's servant, whose mother's name was Zeruiah, a widow woman, even he lifted up his hand against the king. And this was the cause that he lifted up his hand against the king. Solomon built Milo and repaired the breaches of the city of David his father. And the man Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor. And Solomon, seeing the young man that he was industrious, he made him ruler over all the charge of the house of Joseph. So we have the house of Joseph, which is in tribe of Manasseh. He is in charge of them to get this project done. Did you see this, young people? That Solomon, a wise man, has an eye out for the industrious young man. And he puts him in a position of authority. And it's still true to this very day that if you are industrious, if you're the guy at the job who's just being industrious, you're just working, it's amazing what happens. So he gets to be elevated in this. But, verse number 29, it came to pass at that time when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem that the prophet Ahijah, the Shilonite, found him in the way, and he had clad himself in a new garment, and they too were alone in the field. And Ahijah caught the new garment that was on him and rent it into 12 pieces. Are you imagining this? Jeroboam is now a man of great authority. He's in charge of a big project, a lot of people. And one day he's out in the field, and there's this man that comes up to him, and he's wearing a new garment. And just imagine it. This man comes up, and Jeroboam, yeah. Can I help you? Pulls off his cloak. It's like, what's this guy doing? All of a sudden it just tears. And then he just tears it again. And he tears off piece after piece until he's got 12 pieces around him. Jeroboam's like, you okay, buddy? You nuts? What's going on here? And then he said to Jeroboam, take thee 10 pieces. For thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and will give 10 tribes to thee. You see that? Let me read that again. Verse 31. Take thee 10 pieces, for thus saith who? The Lord. Who, if this happens, which is very, very unlikely, we've got a king who has incredible wisdom, who has incredible wealth, who is at the zenith of an empire. That does not seem the zenith. That seems like it's still going up. The idea that somehow in this man's lifetime, he's going to have 10 tribes doesn't make much sense. But this is what God had said, apparently. Well, verse 32. But he, this is the prophet still talking, but he shall have one tribe for my servant David's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, the city which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel. Because they have forsaken me and have worshipped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and Chemoth, the god of the Moabites, and Milcom, the god of the children of Ammon, and have not walked in my ways to do that which is right in mine eyes, and to keep my statutes and my judgments, as did David his father. Okay, so this person, this man is Jeroboam is listening to this prophet who's predicting that somehow that he will have 10 tribes and lead 10 tribes. He's never in his life had the thought cross his mind, I'll be king. There's no way. I mean, it's not even if you thought about it, there's just no way. I mean, it's rock solid in the house of David. But here the man of God says it's going to happen, and he tells them the reason it's going to happen. Because God, the Lord God is angry because they've gone after other gods. They've served idols. And so if in the unlikely event this actually happens, it will definitely be of God. And when it does happen, he'll know why it happened. Because Solomon has taken the nation down a path that has not pleased the Lord. So you would imagine then that Jeroboam would take great warning to say, I don't want to make the same mistake, lest somebody else be walking in a field someday when I'm king and have a garment ripped in 12 pieces, or in my case, 10 pieces, and maybe he gets 8 and I get 2 or something. Let's avoid that. I'm not going to make this mistake because, wow, if the day came when I'm somehow walking around as king with a crown on my head, I will know this is what happened. Verse 34. Howbeit, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him prince all the days of his life for David, my servant's sake, whom I chose, because he kept my commandments and my statutes. But I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand. I will give it unto thee, even 10 tribes. And unto thy son will I give, unto his son, will I give one tribe, that David, my servant, may have a light always before me in Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen me to put my name there. And I will take thee, Jeroboam, and thou shalt reign according to all that thy soul desireth, and shalt be king over Israel. Wow. Do you know, now, the chances happening are almost zero, but if it were to happen, this would obviously be of God. And if it were to happen, he now has a promise from God. This is God saying this. This is not Jeroboam making this happen, because it's impossible to make happen. But he said, I will take thee, and thou shalt reign according to all that thy soul desirest, and shalt be king over Israel. In other words, I'm going to make it happen. You're going to be king. You're going to stay king, because I will make it happen. And verse number 38, here's another promise. And it shall be, if thou wilt hearken unto all that I command thee, and wilt walk in my ways, and do that is right in my sight, to keep my statutes and my commandments, as David my servant did, that I will be with thee, and build thee a sure house, as I built for David, and will give Israel unto thee. And I will for this afflict the seed of David, but not forever. Wow. The same promise he gave to David, that I'm going to make you a sure house. In other words, you're going to be king, and your son's going to be king, and your grandson's going to be king, and your great-grandson's going to be king. It's going to be a sure house, because you're going to do right. In fact, in this very prophecy, he's saying, now look, because Dave did right, his son is king, and his son doing wrong will not stop me from making sure that David's grandson still gets to be king because of what David did. And Jeroboam, if you will follow me, I will make sure that you have a sure house in the same way, even if your son messes up like David's did. Wow, this is awesome. Well, the chances happening are almost zero. But guess what happened? In chapter 12, after Solomon dies, Rehoboam, his son, becomes king. Now, do you hear the difference? Jeroboam is the guy who got the 10 ripped up pieces of garment. Rehoboam is the son of Solomon, who becomes the king. And after he becomes king, they all come to him, and they have this big day where they're celebrating him becoming king. And they come to him and they say, your dad was actually kind of hard on us, and we were just asking if you could be kind to us and just treat us lightly, and not be so mean. And Rehoboam says, let me think about how to answer this question. He goes back, says, give me a little time. He talks to the older gentlemen, his advisors that were smart and wise, and he says, what do you think? And they said, you know what, just talk kindly to them and do what they're saying. They're going to follow you all your life. That's a good idea. Then he goes to these young men that he is his contemporaries, the guys he grew up with, going to school with. He's like, what do you think? And they're like, no, man, you got to show yourself tough, man. If you show weakness now, they're going to always just run over you. So he has to choose between the old men's council and the young men's council, and he chooses the young men's council, goes back to them, and says, you think my dad was tough? I'm going to be tougher, man. You're going to submit because I'm king now. And guess what happened? People weren't happy, especially when the very next day, Rehoboam sends his tax collector to go get the taxes. Guess what they did? They stoned him. Rehoboam thought that would be a good time to leave. So he quickly runs out to run away, and here's how Mr. Jeroboam becomes the king. Verse number 19 of chapter 12, please. 1 Kings chapter 12, verse number 19. So Israel rebelled against the house of David unto this day, and it came to pass, when all Israel heard that Jeroboam was come again, they sent and called him into the congregation and made him king over all Israel. There was none that followed the house of David, but the tribe of Judah only. So now we have a new king. So Jeroboam, after God had made him that promise, Solomon began just noticing God lifting him up, and Solomon tried to kill Jeroboam. So Jeroboam fled to the country of Egypt and stayed there until he heard that Solomon was dead. He came back to his home country, and when they found out this guy who's got great ability, whatever, God just lifted him up in the eyes of the people. They could have picked anybody else. They picked the guy who's been hiding out in Egypt, and they made him king. What were the chances of that? That just orchestrated this way. It should have been obvious to Jeroboam, this is what God is doing. And undoubtedly, he comes back, he's like, wow, it's been rough. I've been living over there in exile, and finally the guy who wants to kill me is dead, and I'm home. And like 5 minutes later, like, and you're king! Me? You're king! King Jeroboam! Wow, this is awesome. So he's king. Verse number 25. Then Rehoboam built Shechem in Mount Ephraim, and dwelt therein, and went out from thence and built Penuel. So he now has to build a new capital, because the capital of Jerusalem, of course, is in Judah, and that's David's, and therefore it belongs to King Rehoboam. So Jeroboam has to start this whole process of building this kingdom, and they're all following him. They're great. So now let me just recap and show you that God made him king. God told him before he became king, he would make him king, just to prove that when it happened, it was all God. And God had told him several things. Number one, that I'm taking it away from this guy because what he did wrong. Don't do that stuff. Number two, if you do right, I will be responsible. The same way that I am going to miraculously make you king, I will keep you king. Just do what's right. Now, let me give you the bad news. Let me spoil the whole story by telling you something. From this king forward, this is the very first king of when they split into Judah and into Israel now. He's the first one, Jeroboam. From him on, there will not be one king of Israel that God would mark as being right in his sight. They're all going to be evil in his sight. Except one, he just reigned for a month, and we don't know, never even tells us. Otherwise, they're all evil. Directly says, and they did evil in the sight of the Lord. And for almost every one of them, it'll say, he followed in the sins of Jeroboam. The Jeroboam he's talking about here is this Jeroboam. What in the world could Jeroboam do that would... This guy was a nobody, but he worked really hard. And then one day, out of the blue, when he was kind of the middling in charge of a project with one tribe, now he's suddenly told to become a king. What? He doesn't even understand it. This guy just walks off and, okay. And now he's trying to be killed, and he's able to escape. And then one day, boom, he's king. This is impossible. You would think that this man would go to God that day and say, Lord, I cannot believe I'm sitting here as the king. This is impossible. I can't believe this. Wow, thank you for letting me do this. Lord, help me with this. That's a lot to do. Wow. And I think it'd be easy for me every day to know I didn't put myself here. and I won't keep myself here. But here's what's going to happen. Once again, there's going to be a problem. He's going to face a challenge. What's the challenge? Let's look at it. Verse number 26. And Jeroboam said in his heart, now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. Have you ever been insecure? Someday I'm going to lose this kingdom. I mean, let's be honest. All my life, we've all talked about the great house of David, the great palace at Jerusalem, the temple. And that temple thing is what he's really worried about. Look at verse 27. He's thinking about this in his heart. This is all in his heart. If this people go up to do sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then shall the heart of this people turn again unto their Lord, even unto Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they shall kill me, and go again to Rehoboam, king of Judah. Now, I want you to think about this and tell me whether or not his problem has logic or not. Okay, here's the situation. So, Jaden, we've got Israel. Israel before was just a bunch of tribes, but the main tribe was over here in Judah. In fact, their army for the 10 tribes was only a little bit larger than the army of this one tribe of Judah. And from David's time, he had taken a small city in the mountains called Jerusalem and had built it into a magnificent capital. Then his son, after him, Solomon, had built it into a magnificent capital city. One that would cause people to travel from all over the world to come and to see and to hear of Solomon, and would say when they got there that once I got here, I traveled here from months away, and when I got here, I looked at it and said, wow, the half had never yet been told. In other words, what I heard about, so much that made me want to come see it, and it was only half of what was actually here once I got here. That was the place that Jerusalem was, and it's what it still was at that time. But what do we have over here? We don't have a capital city. So Jeroboam has got to start his own. He's going to start building his own capital. He's going to start from zero to try to compete with that. But here's the bigger problem. The bigger problem is this. In this magnificent capital city is one of the 7 ancient wonders, of the ancient world. That being the Temple of Solomon, which was absolutely mind-bogglingly beautiful. It was so beautiful that many, many generations later, when it had been destroyed and they rebuilt one, the old men who had seen the original temple, when they saw this new, beautiful temple that made the young people just shout and sing for joy, the old men would stand there and just cry, just weep. Because here's how the Bible describes it to those men. It was as to them as nothing compared to the old one, just nothing. So that's what was over there in Jerusalem. And this is where they're supposed to worship. In fact, the Bible would tell them they're supposed to go to the high priest, and that high priest was in Jerusalem. That was where it was done. And so in the law, there was going to be these 4 times a year they were going to travel from all their homes, and they're going to go to the capital city where the house of David, King Rehoboam, was ruling, and they're going to go there every year 4 times, all the men. They're going to have feasts there. We're going to worship together. We're going to sing together. We're going to have praises together. And then we're going to go home to our homes again. So every year there's going to be this migration, several times a year like there always has been, back to the enemy capital, where they're going to do things worshiping God. Is where you kind of unite as a people, and we're going to stay united instead of divided, because we're going to this centralized place. And one day they're going to be like, why do we have to have 2 kings? How about we just go back to this other one? He's not that bad. Let's just kill this guy over here and go back to him. Question, does this make sense as a problem? Yes or no? We got a yes. Did you think this through pretty good? What do you think? You're being quiet tonight. Does it make sense? Let me say, from my logic, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, if I was looking at, yeah, you know what? We're about 10 years away from the people saying, why do we still have this other guy? We're going to go back over here and be like, oh, I miss this place. It's so awesome. And wow, look at that palace over there. It's beautiful, and I'm going to see that this guy Rehoboam ain't so bad, and we're going to get together with my Judean friends. Good to see you guys, man. It's been so long. Good to see you, bro. And we're going to have the same culture, the same language, the same God. We're back together worshiping. And there's Mark King over there kind of like, can I come worship too? Rehoboam, don't kill me. I'm going to come worship too. After a while, like, we don't need two kings. Let's just do the one. Jeroboam sees an issue, and the issue makes sense. Yes? It's a problem. At least the way he sees it, for sure. But let me ask you, who had promised him that he would keep him king, that he would take care of him? Who promised that? God did. God did. But it's a problem. I'm going to tell you this because I don't know what would have happened otherwise. I don't know how God would have kept Rehoboam on the throne. How would he have done that? We'll never know. If Rehoboam had stayed right with God and had let his people go to Jerusalem, this enemy capital city, on the other side of the border, several times a year to worship with their Judean brethren and come home again over and over and over and over, if he himself would be able to sneak in and try to make friends and say, we're going to worship here, how would God have kept him alive and kept him on the throne? How? I don't know. To this day, I don't know. But he would have. How do I know that? Because he said he would. Now, last Sunday morning, if you weren't here, you got to go and just ask me. I'll give the message again. Abraham, what made him special was that he believed God's promises to the point at which he would take a knife and raise it above his own son's body there on an altar and be prepared genuinely to plunge it into that young man's body because he believed the promise that in Isaac so that seed be called. He believed that he would raise that man again from the dead according to Hebrews chapter 11. He knew that once he killed that boy, God would do the miraculous because he had to, because he made a promise. But Jeroboam lacked that. So what was going to be the recourse that he had at his, he's got to figure out how to do it. He's got to figure out some way. Now he's stuck in his life trying to figure out, how do I keep from losing people to him? How do I get them to stay with me? I don't just have this drain going on there. How do I keep them here? And here's what he's going to do. Let's look at the next verse. Wherefore, verse 28, whereupon the king took counsel. First thing he did. So he didn't just make it up on his own. He took counsel. He went to other people, and here's the important thing. Those people he went to saw it from his perspective. He went to smart people. He went to men who had a lot of experience. And he said, here's the situation. And apparently, these guys were like, yeah, we got an issue. And he, with them, he's going to do something that's really hard. He's going to go to great lengths to keep his people from having to go over there and causing this chain reaction where eventually he gets killed because they don't need him anymore. And here's what they do. Verse 28, whereupon the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold. What? And said unto them, here's what he say. You know, folks, it is much too much for you to go up to Jerusalem every year. Over there. No. Behold, thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. He just, in one moment of time, he just amalgamated some, we could say, paganness, right? Worshipping some sort of a molten object, like a calf. And he melded it right back together with their history, saying, I'm not giving you new gods. I'm giving you the actual gods who originally got you here. He put them right back in history and said, yeah, the ones that got you in Egypt, these are them. He offers them this much more convenient way, instead of traveling all the way up into the mountains to Jerusalem and all the way back again, over and over each year. No. In fact, we made you 2. And we're going to put one in each end of our country. Verse 29, and he set one in Bethel and the other in Dan. One at one extreme of the country, the other at the other extreme. So now everybody can get to one really easily. So he is saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make worshiping God easier for you. I'm going to update it and make it more modern. Just like all around you, because if I don't do that, if I try to keep the old ways, the ways we used to use, I'm going to lose you guys And so to stop from losing you as worshipers, I am going to figure out a way that makes it all easier for you, and that at the same time makes it so that it's more like everywhere else. Now he's going to have to construct this whole thing all over again, verse 31. Verse 30. And this thing became what's the next word? A sin. For the people went to worship before the one, even unto Dan. So the next year, all the vendors in Jerusalem were getting ready to have the extra inflow of crowds it had every year. And that year, it was way down. In fact, everybody just from Judah showed up. In Dan, there was this mass influx of people. It was like never before. And they had an amazing worship service. Everybody showed up. And they worshiped the God that brought them up out of Egypt. Verse number 31. And he made an house of high places, and made priests of the lowest of the people, which were not of the sons of Levi. And Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 8th month, on the 15th day of the month, like unto the feast that is in Judah. And he offered upon the altar. So did he in Bethel, sacrificing unto the calves that he had made. And he placed in Bethel the priests of the high places which he had made. So he offered upon the altar which he had made in Bethel, the 15th day of the 8th month, even in the month which he had devised in his own heart, and ordained a feast unto the children of Israel, and offered upon the altar a burnt incense. This makes me sick. Because do you realize how much work he had to go through? Do you realize he had to invent a whole new tradition for them to incorporate as their... Do you realize he had to get the training together, had to figure out someone who's going to pick priests, he had to figure out how they're going to do their thing from what they used to do from these guys and some from that country, and he's got to figure out all this stuff. Do you realize that day he had to figure out what's the good day to have my feast on, and then he had to construct this whole thing. He had to just do it all. That's what he did. That's how he did it. And so you have this situation where he has a quandary in his life. The quandary is that if I do it the way that I'm supposed to do it, it won't work. So my solution then is to figure out how I can utilize a new way, abandon the old way, get a new way that won't have that same weakness to it, and we're going to employ this, and it's going to work. And sure enough, just like with Asa, it worked. Everybody showed up. Nobody went over to Jerusalem. There was no mass rebellion. There was not a bunch of people saying, "This is wicked. Have you not read Exodus chapter 20 about making images?" Nothing like that happened. It worked. So his solution that he came up with fixed the problem. And now we have a man who has made an entirely new religion that they claim is basically the real old one, but updated in some ways. That old thing in Jerusalem, we don't need to go there. That's theirs. That's David's thing. That's their thing. We got ours, and there we are. So what's the aftermath of this? Would you mind turning to chapter 15, please? First Kings chapter 15. We're going to look at verse number 25. 1 Kings chapter 15, verse number 25. And Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, began to reign over Jerusalem in the 2nd year of Asa, king of Judah, and reigned over Israel 2 years. Verse 26, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and walked in the way of his father, and in his sin wherewith he made Israel to sin. What was this sin? It was the sin that he still would go to Bethel and Dan and have these big services. Start out in Dan, eventually the focus becomes in Bethel. And that's what he does. He does it. Would you mind turning with me to chapter verse 33? Verse 33. It says, in the 3rd year of Asa, king of Judah. Now remember Asa? Remember, 3rd year. Was he doing good or bad in his 3rd year? Good. He was doing great in his 3rd year. So, and during that time when there's revival happening over here, here's what's going on in Israel. In the third year of Asa, king of Judah, behold, Baasha, the son of Ahijah, to reign over Israel in Tirzah, 24 years. And he did that which is evil in the sight of the Lord, and walked in the way of who? There's Jeroboam's name again. And in the sin wherewith he made Israel to sin. Wow. Do you realize that over here, they've already had mediocre king, now a good king who's going to turn kind of bad. Do you realize that's going on over in there? But over here, they're staying faithful to the way that Jeroboam gave us. We don't veer. Keep going here. Look at chapter 16, please. Chapter 16, verse number 18. 1 Kings 16, 18. It says, and it came to pass when Zimri saw the people that the city was taken, that he went into the palace of the king's house and burnt the king's house over him in the fire, so that he died. For his sins which he sinned in doing evil in the sight of the Lord, in walking in the way of who? Jeroboam. And in his sin which he did, to make Israel to sin. Now we have the next king doing the same thing. This is so frustrating. We can't break this because Jeroboam, in his attempt to fix a drainage problem where he's going to leak people into there, and he doesn't want to keep them. I'm afraid I'll lose them. I'm afraid they're going to turn on me. I'm afraid we're going to shrink and they're going to go eventually kill me. So I want to keep them here. I don't want them to lose people. So instead, I'm going to make this new way that's going to keep people here. And guess what happens? It works. And he passes that same flaw down. And if you now know, there's already starting to be a disintegration amongst the whole nation, though, because God's blessing is not on them. Look at it with me, would you mind? Chapter 16 still. Look at verse 25. It says this. But Omri wrought evil in the eyes of the Lord and did worse than all that were before him. For he walked in all the way of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and in his sin wherewith he made Israel to sin, to provoke the Lord God of Israel to anger with their vanities. I'm going to suggest this to you. If you decide that you cannot make it following what God has told you to do in His Word, so to fix it, you decide that you can invent a new way where you can make the old way look like it was the bad way and you have the real right way, but it's your own invention. It might work. But there's a very good chance that you will most definitely pass that same new issue on to the next generation, and the next generation, the next generation. And in the fact that it worked, in other words, whatever you're trying to fix, it fixed. It didn't actually cause that problem. You were trying to fix it. He's right. I mean, it stopped going to Jerusalem. It worked. But in that, you lost God's blessing, and even more, you then pass that on to the next generation. Look at me in verse number 30. Verse number 30. And Ahab, the son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord above all that were before him. And it came to pass, as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, that he took to wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Zidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. And he reared up an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he had built in Samaria. And Ahab made a grove, and Ahab did more to provoke the Lord God of Israel to anger than all the kings of Israel that were before him. So you see in verse number 31, he stays in the same sin of Jeroboam, but now he takes it to a new low, and now he's just outright serving Baal. So now we actually call him Baal. We got another there, but at the same time, we still have that old thing that Jeroboam had brought in all those years before. We're not done yet, unfortunately. I wish we were done, but would you mind turning to chapter 22? Now we're so far down. These people are so faithful to keep the sin going. The thing that a man did not really believe it. He did not do it because he really thought this calf was it. No, he made this calf originally not because he believed the calf had any power. He was just trying to stop a flood of people from going to his enemy's base. And so to keep them from going to his capital city, he invented this whole thing. But now that every generation after him continues to keep it going. Look at verse number 51, please. This is the last chapter of 1 Kings 22:51. And Ahaziah, the son of Ahab, began to reign over Israel in Samaria in the 17th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and he reigned 2 years in Israel. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord and walked in the way of his father and the way of his mother and in the way of who? There he is. Son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. And he served Baal and worshipped him and provoked to anger the Lord God of Israel according to all that his father had done. 2 Kings, please. I want you to see this. It never ends. I wish it was. We're going to go quickly, though. 2 Kings chapter 3, please. Look at verse number 1. Now, Jeroboam, the son of Ahab, this is a new Jeroboam. I wrote that wrong. Jehoram, you'll see the German later. Jehoram, the son of Ahab, began to reign over Israel and Samaria the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, and reigned 12 years. And he wrought evil in the sight of the Lord, but not like his father and his mother. For he put away the image of Baal that his father had made. Isn't that a blessing? So this young man takes some steps away. Now you say, why did he take these steps away from the sin of his father and mother? That will be a subject we will hit in about 2 weeks. You'll see it. And it's awesome. There is a short-lived but serious revival that's going to take place, to the point at which he's going to pull back from a lot of those gross sins that his grandfather and his father had brought Israel into. However, no, verse 3, nevertheless, what? Do you know what cleave means? What does cleave mean? Okay, Tabitha, come on up. Show me cleaving. All right, now, I want you to imagine you're 3 years old again. Here's my arm. You see a humongous dog coming. Cleave to me. Cleave to me. You're not cleaving it. You're not really cleaving it. No, you're not cleaving. There you go. You're almost cleaving. You're almost cleaving. Cleave it. Cleave, 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 cleave. That's cleaving, right? What do we cleave to? We cleave to that which we don't want to lose, right? That's very important to us. So what is he going to cleave to? Thank you, sweetie. What is he cleaving to? It says this. Nevertheless, he cleaved unto the sin of Jeroboam, which he made Israel sin. He departed not from therein. What? What was the sin? You know what the sin was? This sin was not a big deal to Jeroboam. He didn't believe that this calf was really all that important. He didn't believe that. It was simply to stop people from going over to Jerusalem. He just invented this thing, devised in his own heart, and yet generations later, we've got to keep this. You can get rid of Baal, but we can't get rid of this. Why? It just keeps going and going and going. Look at chapter 10. Oh my goodness, chapter 10. The next king is going to still fall in the same crazy sin. Verse 28. Oh, thus Jehu. Who is Jehu? Jehu's a good man. He's one on his chariot. He said, come see my zeal for the Lord. Come see my zeal. He loved God. He's the one who rid out of that country, that wicked Jezebel. And guess what he did? Thus Jehu destroyed Baal out of Israel. Good or bad? Good. Amen. Woo! Howbeit, verse 29. From the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin, Jehu departed not from after them, to wit, the golden calves that were in Bethel and that were in Dan. Why were those things even there? Well, they were there because he was afraid I could not make it if I served God the way that the Bible says to serve God. If I did it, I would lose the hearts of those people who are with me. So to keep them with me, I'm going to adjust how we worship. Not because I really believe it, not because it really is like, oh, God spoke to me, but I will say it was. And I will do it so that I can keep their attention and say, we don't go over there, we stay right here. It's easier, it's better, it's modern, it's cool, it's great. Wait, you see, it's the real one. This is the real thing. Oh, chapter 13, please. Oh, 2 Kings 13. Pastor, how long ago? We're almost done with this, but I didn't keep putting this all there. This is just sitting here. Verse number 1. In the 320th year of Joash, the son of Ahaziah, Joash being a good king for the first part of his reign, king of Judah, Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, began to reign over Israel and Samaria and reigned 17 years. And did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, and followed the sin of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, which made Israel to sin, and he departed not therefrom. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and delivered them into the hand of Hazael, king of Syria, and into the hand of Benhadad, king son of Hazael, all their days. And Jehoahaz besought the Lord. And the Lord hearkened unto him, for he saw the oppression of Israel, because the king of Syria oppressed them. And the Lord gave Israel a savior, so that they went out from under the hand of the Syrians, and the children of Israel dwelt in their tents as aforetime. Now, I'm going to say it again. And the children of Israel dwelt in their tents as beforetime. At this point in their economy, what do they live in as a rule? In beautiful big cities? No, their economy had sunk so low. They now are nomadic, living in tents. Nevertheless, verse 6, oh, this smites the heart. Nevertheless, oh Lord, they departed not from the sins of the house of Jeroboam, who made Israel sin, but walked therein, and there remained the grove also in Samaria. Neither did leave of the people to Jehoahaz, but 50 horsemen. God left them 50 horsemen. 50 guys on horse. That's their arm. And 10 chariots and 10,000 footmen. Let me just tell you, there was a day when they were almost 1 million man strong. Now they're down to 10,000 soldiers. Things are not looking well doing it this way. He was afraid that Jeroboam was afraid if I don't do something to keep them all here, I'm going to lose them. And in the end, guess what he has? A tiny handful of people. Right now, the city of Nazareth has many times more than this at this moment, and it's still considered a small city. The entire country had 10,000 soldiers. This is so pitiful. And the whole purpose of this was that they would make it. So sad. Verse number 10. In the 37th year of Jehoash, king of Judah, began Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, to reign over Israel, and in Samaria he reigned 16 years. And that was evil in the sight of the Lord, and he departed not from all the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel sin, and walked therein. Oh, thank you for not changing. That's brilliant. Chapter 14, verse 23. Chapter 14, verse 23 says, in the 15th year of Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah, Jeroboam, the son of Joash, it's a new Jeroboam, king of Israel, began to reign in Samaria, and he reigned 41 years. That was just evil in the sight of the Lord, and he departed not from all the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, and made Israel to sin. Come on, guys! When are you going to learn? They don't learn. They don't learn. Chapter 15, verse number 8. Chapter 15, verse number 8. In the 38th year of Amaziah, the king of Judah, did Zechariah, the son of Jeroboam, reign in Israel in Samaria 6 months. That was his evil in the sight of the Lord, as his father had done. And he departed not from the sin of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. I want to ask you as you're reading these things, why? Why did they never, ever stop doing this? Verse 17. It says, in the 30th year of Ahaziah, the king of Judah, began Manaam, the son of Gadi, to reign over Israel, and he reigned 10 years in Samaria, that which is evil in the sight of the Lord, and he departed not from all the sins of Jeroboam, Nebat, which made Israel to sin. Why did they not decide, we're just done with this, it's not working for us, it's not ever worked for us, but here we go. Let's just finish this up. So we're already here. Verse 23, in the 50th year of Ahaziah, the king of Judah, Pekahiah, the son of Manaam, began to reign over Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 2 years. It was just evil in the sight of the Lord, and he departed not from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. Now we're coming to the very end of this kingdom. We're going to see the very collapse of it, and you'll see faithful to the very end. In verse 27, in the 50th year of Ahaziah, the king of Judah, Pekah, the son of Remaliah, began to reign over Israel in Samaria, and reigned 20 years, which is evil in the sight of the Lord, and he departed not from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. This man that day had no idea the repercussions that his decision to be made, the decision to be made so that he could not lose the congregation he had around him, that it would not just go away because they would just be driven away forever. He said, yeah, I've got to keep them here, so I'm going to change what's right so they go and do something else, make it modern, make it cool, make it appealing, make it easier, make it convenient, and then it gets passed on and passed on and passed on, and you say, well, it's working. No, it's not working, because this is going on, small, but they keep going. Oh, my soul. Chapter 17, we got 2 more kings, and we're done. Chapter 17, verse number 6. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried away Israel out into Assyria and placed them in Halah and Habor by the river of Gozan in the cities of Medes. Verse number 20, skip down there. We'll stop moving to our last one. And the Lord rejected all the seed of Israel and afflicted them and delivered them in the hand of the spoilers until he cast them out of his sight. And he rent Israel from the house of David. And they made Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, king. And Jeroboam drave Israel from following the Lord and made them sin a what? A great sin. For the children of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did, and they departed not from them until the Lord removed Israel, out of his sight, as he had said by his servant the prophets. So was Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria unto this day. So let's go back and see what we had to begin with. Jeroboam, God had said, I'm going to make you king. And all Jeroboam had to do was just to believe that I don't know how, it doesn't make sense to me. I can genuinely see that if I don't change the way I do things, it's not going to work. But God said, I'll take care of you. But Jeroboam can't see it. Doesn't make sense. We're going to become less and less and less. You guys are just slowly going to go over there with these guys. And when you're like, I don't need you, you're going to kill me. I've got to figure this out. How can I convince you not to go over there? Okay, how about this? You see these two golden calves? These are your real gods. They're the ones who got us out of Egypt. Woo! We got this new way. And it's just like everyone else around us. We're finally cool like everybody else. It's much more, it's way too far. Don't go over there. All right, let's do this. And this is the thing that the kids get passed on. I want to ask you now. Why did not one of those kings, even the couple that tried to get away from serving Baal, even the one who actually called out on God and said, God, deliver us, and God did deliver them, but they couldn't give this one up. Why? And I'll tell you, I think I know why. Because the same problem still existed. Did it not? The entire time this is happening, if you get rid of those calves, where do you go? Back to Jerusalem. If you pick up your Bible and start reading the Old Testament and start reading the law, you're going to realize I got to go to the sons of Levi where they are priests, not these other guys we invented. And if we do that, where are those guys at? Oh, the high priest is in Jerusalem over there. Can I do that? It didn't make sense 5 generations ago. It still doesn't make sense now. And it will not make sense 5 generations later. And the whole time, if they just would have trusted the Lord, somehow they could have done right and still existed. How? I don't know. I have to agree with these kings. It doesn't make sense. And tonight, let me tell you something. If you live your life by the Bible, it does not make sense that you're going to make it. That your kids will believe what you believe. It doesn't make any sense. That you're going to make it financially. It doesn't make any sense. That you're going to be able to, in this environment, not be stoned one day, genuinely. I'll tell you, if our church does not change, we're sunk. There's too many cool things out there. We're going to lose them all. I don't want to lose my kids. It's beautiful out there. I'll tell you what we can do. If we don't want to lose them, we can make something more convenient, easier on all of us, to be honest with you. And we can make it all work. And what's sad is that the same problem we face in this generation as we face for the next generation, and the next generation, and the next generation. And even though my grandson will probably be like, we've got to get right with God. And he'll get right in a bunch of ways. But in that way, which his grandpa William decided, we better change this or we're going to lose everybody. He's going to be like, yeah, we'll still lose everybody. We better not change that. Let's keep it the new way that Grandpa invented. And you know what's going to happen? God is going to allow us to shrink. Folks, I'll be honest with you. There's not as many churches like this around. Let's be honest, right? But that's true of every Christian denomination on this planet right now. It's not like we switch it all up and it's just like we're going to just go gangbusters. It could happen for a little while. And we'd be like, "Well, look at us, we're big now, wee!" And I'd love to be that. Be the big boys in town. Be great. But we have just signed our death warrant because God's blessing will be taken off of us. And the day will come when our big, huge place that we finally got to buy and or build or whatever is going to have a couple rows of mostly senior saints. And that's it. Because God's blessing will be taken off. We don't want to be that way. We want to stick by the stuff even if, let's just be honest, it doesn't make sense. How is God going to keep us alive? If you go to school and you study and you don't become part of the woke mafia and you don't do all their stuff and kowtow to their idols they have now, they're not going to let you go up in the corporate ladder. You're not going to be nothing. You're going to never go anywhere. You better check. No, don't. Trust in the Lord. If I give my tithes, if I keep giving, it doesn't matter. Look at my budget. This makes no sense. Trust in the Lord. Well, our teenagers, there's nobody new is going to come here. I mean, all the guys are like, "What's this? You guys are so old-fashioned, and what is this kind of music? I don't even know, is this even music? Where are you?" Trust in the Lord. He's been faithful to this moment.